My name is Madeline, 29 years old, and family has always been my everything. Every year we gather for my dad's birthday, a tradition I cherish. So when Mom called saying this year's celebration was canceled because Dad was sick, I immediately made his favorite soup and drove over to care for him. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed cars everywhere. Through the window, I saw balloons, gifts, and my entire family laughing around the dining table. My heart sank as reality hit me. They had deliberately excluded me. Before I tell you what I did next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted. Growing up as the middle child between my older brother Kevin and younger sister Rebecca was never easy. While my siblings seemed to effortlessly claim their places in our family dynamic, I often felt like an afterthought. Kevin was the brilliant firstborn who could do no wrong in our mother Amanda's eyes, while Rebecca was the baby of the family who needed extra attention and care. I existed somewhere in the middle, constantly trying to carve out my own space. Our modest two-story home in suburban Pennsylvania housed the five of us comfortably, but I always felt like I was occupying borrowed space rather than truly belonging. My bedroom, the smallest in the house, overlooked the backyard, where family gatherings often took place. From my window, I would sometimes watch as my mother organized activities, noticing how she would light up when interacting with my siblings in a way she rarely did with me. Despite feeling overlooked, I remained fiercely loyal to my family. When I received a full scholarship to Cornell University, I turned it down to attend a local state college, instead unwilling to move far from home. My mother called it practical, but she had encouraged Kevin to attend Yale, and later helped Rebecca apply to schools across the country. The double standard stung, but I convinced myself it was my choice. After college, I secured a position as an elementary school teacher, a career I genuinely love. Working with fourth graders brings me joy every day, and last month I was promoted to lead teacher for my grade level. When I called my mother with the news, she responded with, "That's nice, honey. Did I tell you Rebecca might be getting that marketing internship in New York?" The conversation quickly shifted to my sister's potential opportunity, my accomplishment forgotten. My apartment is small but perfect for me. I've decorated it with care, filling it with books, plants, and colorful artwork from my students. When my family visited for the first time, my mother glanced around and remarked, "Well, it's certainly cozy. Have you thought about looking for something in a better neighborhood?" My father George offered a weak smile but said nothing to defend me. This pattern of criticism, followed by his passive acceptance, was all too familiar. The pattern of exclusion began subtly. When I was 16, I discovered through social media that my family had taken a weekend trip to our lake house. When confronted, my mother claimed, "We told you about it weeks ago. You must have forgotten." I was certain no one had mentioned it to me, but I began to doubt my own memory. As the years passed, the instances became more frequent and harder to dismiss. Group photos where everyone but me had been told to wear blue. Inside jokes that stopped when I entered the room. Christmas gifts that were noticeably less thoughtful than those given to my siblings. At Rebecca's college graduation party, I overheard my Aunt Pauline ask my mother where I was, to which she replied, "Oh, Madeline never comes to these things. She's always too busy." I had never been invited. My extended family often reinforced these dynamics. Uncle Harold would greet Kevin with enthusiastic backslaps, and Rebecca with warm hugs while offering me a distracted nod. My cousins Julia and Nathan, once my childhood playmates, now barely acknowledged me at family gatherings. They had seamlessly integrated into the family hierarchy that somehow always positioned me as an outsider. Last month, Kevin got engaged to his girlfriend Amber. At their engagement party, I was seated with distant relatives. I barely knew, while my sister sat at the main table with our parents. When I asked my mother about the seating arrangement, she said dismissively, "We thought you'd enjoy getting to know your cousin Robert's new wife." Robert's wife spent the entire evening texting under the table. My sister Rebecca had mastered the art of the backhanded compliment. At Christmas, she looked me up and down and said, "That dress actually looks good on you. It hides your problem areas really well." My mother nodded in agreement, adding, "You should let Rebecca take you shopping sometime." Despite all this, my father's birthday remained special to me. For over 20 years, I'd baked his favorite chocolate hazelnut cake from scratch, a tradition he genuinely appreciated. Last year, I had coordinated the entire celebration when my mother claimed to be too busy. I sent invitations, prepared the food, decorated the house, and even created a slideshow of family memories. My father had hugged me with tears in his eyes, whispering, "This is the best birthday I've ever had, Maddie." It was one of the few times I felt truly valued by my family. So when my mother called 3 days ago to say this year's celebration was canceled, I was both disappointed and suspicious. Dad's birthday had never been canceled before, not even when my grandfather passed away the day before. We had gathered anyway, finding comfort in our tradition during a difficult time. The idea that a simple cold would derail such an important family event seemed unlikely, but I wanted to believe my mother wouldn't lie about something so significant. The call from my mother came Wednesday evening as I was grading papers at my kitchen table. The cheerful ringtone I had assigned to family calls seemed mockingly bright as I reached for my phone. "Madeline, honey," my mother said, her voice overly casual. "Just wanted to let you know we're canceling your father's birthday dinner on Saturday. He's feeling under the weather and we don't want to push him." I immediately felt concerned. "Is he okay? What's wrong?" "Oh, nothing serious," she replied dismissively. "Just a bit of a cold, but you know how these things can linger at his age." My father had just turned 61, hardly ancient. "Do you want me to bring over some medicine I could stop by tomorrow after work?" I offered. No, that's not necessary. I've got everything under control." There was a strange muffled sound in the background, like someone talking, followed by what sounded like my mother covering the phone briefly. "He just needs rest. We'll reschedule when he's feeling better." "Are you sure I could at least drop off some soup or something?" "Don't trouble yourself, really. I need to go now. I'll call you next week." She hung up before I could respond. The conversation left me with an uneasy feeling. My mother had been vague and hurried, and something about her tone seemed off. Still, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps she was just stressed about my father being ill. After a restless night, I decided I would visit anyway. Even if the party was canceled, I could still make Dad feel better. I spent Friday evening after work gathering ingredients for his favorite chicken soup with wild rice, the recipe his own mother had passed down. I chopped vegetables, meticulously simmered the broth for hours, and added fresh herbs from my windowsill garden. The familiar process was soothing, giving me a sense of purpose and connection to my family despite the canceled celebration. Saturday morning, I prepared a care package. Along with the container of soup, I added cold medicine, vapor rub, throat lozenges, and a new mystery novel by his favorite author that I had been saving for his birthday. I even included a small box of the artisanal chocolates he loved but would never buy for himself. I dressed in a casual but nice outfit, a soft blue sweater and dark jeans, thinking that looking put together might lift his spirits. The drive to my parents' suburban home took 30 minutes. As I turned onto their street, I rehearsed what I would say, planning to be cheerful but not too energetic in case my father really was feeling poorly. I imagined sitting beside his bed, perhaps reading to him from the new novel while he enjoyed the soup. It would be a quiet but meaningful way to honor his birthday. As I approached the house, I noticed something odd. There were cars parked all along the street, including my brother Kevin's black SUV, and my sister Rebecca's distinctive white compact with the university sticker in the back window. I recognized my Aunt Pauline's red SUV and Uncle Harold's vintage Mustang. Several other vehicles belonged to various cousins and family friends. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I pulled into the driveway. Perhaps there had been a misunderstanding. Maybe my father had taken a sudden turn for the worse, and the family had gathered for support. But that wouldn't explain why no one had called me. As I stepped out of my car, soup container in hand, more inconsistencies became apparent. Through the open windows, I could hear music playing, not loud but festive. The distinctive aroma of my cousin Stephen's famous barbecue ribs wafted through the air, along with the smell of freshly baked pastries. These were not the sounds and smells of a house containing a sick person. With growing apprehension, I approached the front window. The living room was transformed with streamers and balloons in my father's favorite colors of green and gold. A banner reading Happy Birthday George hung across the fireplace, the same banner I had helped my mother select online weeks ago. Through the dining room archway, I could see the large table set with the good china overflowing with food. A pile of brightly wrapped gifts sat on the side table. And there, in the center of it all, was my father looking perfectly healthy in a new sweater, laughing at something my brother had said. My mother stood nearby, directing my younger cousins as they filled glasses with what looked like my father's favorite punch. My sister Rebecca was adjusting a flower arrangement while Aunt Pauline arranged a tray of appetizers. Everyone I loved was there celebrating joyfully without me. The realization hit me with physical force. There was no illness. The party hadn't been canceled at all. I simply hadn't been invited. My heart began racing so fast I could feel it pounding in my ears. A wave of nausea swept over me, as memories flooded back all the times I had been forgotten, excluded, or marginalized, suddenly coming into sharp focus. This wasn't an oversight or a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. The soup container slipped from my trembling hands, nearly spilling before I managed to catch it. I stood frozen, unsure whether to confront them or simply leave. Part of me wanted to run away to pretend I had never seen this betrayal. But a stronger voice inside insisted I deserved answers. After years of making excuses for their behavior, of doubting my own perceptions, I needed the truth. Taking a deep breath, I stepped back from the window and walked toward the front door. My hand hovered over the doorbell. I still had a key, but using it now felt wrong somehow, as if I had already lost the right to enter freely. With another steadying breath, I pressed the bell and heard it chime inside, momentarily cutting through the sounds of celebration. The laughter inside faltered at the sound of the doorbell. I heard my mother call out, "Rebecca, can you get that? It's probably the ice delivery." My grip tightened around the soup container as footsteps approached. The door swung open, and my sister Rebecca stood there, her smile freezing when she saw me. She was wearing a new green dress that matched the party decorations perfectly. "Madeline," she said, her voice a mixture of shock and something that looked remarkably like guilt. "What are you doing here?" Before I could answer, she glanced nervously over her shoulder toward the living room. The background noise had dimmed as people noticed something was happening at the door. One by one, conversations stopped. Music continued playing, an upbeat jazz tune that now seemed to mock the tension building in the air. "I heard Dad was sick," I said, keeping my voice steady, despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. "I brought soup." I held up the container as evidence, watching as Rebecca's eyes widened slightly. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a fish out of water. "Can I come in?" I asked when she remained speechless. Without waiting for a response, I stepped past her into the entryway. The scene before me confirmed everything I had glimpsed through the window, but in fuller, more painful detail. Decorations I had helped plan weeks ago adorned every surface. The table was set with the special occasion china glasses filled with the punch my father only enjoyed on his birthday. And there was my father standing by the fireplace, looking robustly healthy and completely stunned to see me. The room fell silent in waves, like a ripple moving outward from where I stood. My mother was the first to recover her face, transitioning from shock to poorly concealed annoyance. "Madeline," she said, coming forward with a forced smile. "What a surprise." "Yes," I replied quietly. "It certainly is." My father at least had the decency to look ashamed, his eyes dropping to the floor. My brother Kevin stepped forward, placing himself slightly between me and the rest of the family, in what appeared to be a protective gesture, though I couldn't tell who he was trying to protect. "What's going on?" I asked, directing my question to the room at large. My mother cleared her throat. "Your father made a remarkable recovery this morning. We decided to have a small gathering after all. I was going to call you, but things got busy with the preparations." The lie was so transparent it was almost insulting. The house was immaculate, the food abundant and varied, the decorations elaborate. Nothing about this had been thrown together at the last minute. Uncle Harold coughed uncomfortably from his position by the bar. Cousin Julia suddenly found her shoes fascinating, refusing to meet my eyes. Aunt Pauline leaned over to my mother and whispered something that sounded suspiciously like, "I told you she might come." I walked further into the room, still clutching the soup container like a shield. The birthday banner caught my eye again, and I remembered helping my mother order it online nearly a month ago. I had suggested adding "We love you" to the standard text, an addition that was notably absent from the actual banner. On the dining table, I spotted my father's favorite cake from Bellini's Bakery, an establishment that required orders at least a week in advance. Next to it stood a professionally arranged fruit platter in the shape of a 61, my father's new age. Everyone was dressed in coordinated shades of green and gold, a theme I had suggested during a family dinner last month. My mother had dismissed the idea at the time, saying, "That seems like a lot of trouble for a simple birthday." As I catalogued these damning details, I caught sight of my cousin Nathan, quickly slipping his phone into his pocket. I had glimpsed what looked like a social media post about the party, probably shared days ago, with everyone except me. "This doesn't look like a last-minute gathering," I said, my voice stronger now, "and Dad doesn't look sick." My brother Kevin stepped forward, always the peacemaker. "Maddie, it's not what you think. We just thought, with everything going on in your life, with your promotion and all, you might appreciate a weekend to yourself." His explanation might have been convincing, if not for the pitying looks being exchanged around the room. They were the same looks they always gave each other when dealing with difficult, emotional Madeline. "If you wanted to give me a weekend to myself, you could have told me that," I replied evenly, instead of lying about canceling the party. My mother's patience visibly thinned. "Madeline, you're making a scene. If you want to join us now that you're here, you're welcome to. But please don't ruin your father's birthday with one of your episodes." The word episodes hung in the air. It was her favorite way to dismiss any legitimate hurt or anger I expressed, reducing my feelings to a hysterical outburst rather than a reasonable response to mistreatment. The tension in the room thickened as family members shifted uncomfortably. My Aunt Pauline, who had always prided herself on her blunt honesty, finally broke the awkward silence. "Amanda," she said to my mother, "just tell her the truth. This isn't right." My mother shot her a warning look, but Aunt Pauline continued. "We just wanted one peaceful celebration," she said, turning to me with what she probably thought was kindness, but came across as condescension. "Every family event lately turns into the Madeline show. Someone says something you take the wrong way, and suddenly everyone's walking on eggshells." I stared at her, stunned by the unfairness of her assessment. I had spent my entire life carefully managing my reactions, swallowing hurt, making excuses for their behavior, and somehow I was still cast as the problem. My mother nodded in agreement. "You always make everything about yourself, Madeline. Your father deserved one day that wasn't overshadowed by your sensitivity." I turned to my father, hoping against hope that he would defend me, that he would say this wasn't his idea, but he merely looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to another. "Dad," I said softly, "is this what you wanted?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "We thought it would be easier this way, Maddie. Just this once." Just this once. The words echoed in my head as I realized this had likely happened before other gatherings I hadn't even known about. Other times they had deliberately excluded me, and I had remained oblivious. My sister Rebecca, perhaps sensing my realization, added another devastating layer. "We've had family meetings about this, Madeline, about how to handle your reactions. We decided unanimously that for big events, sometimes it's better if you're not there." Family meetings. About me. Without me. The betrayal was so complete, so multifaceted, that I felt oddly calm. There was no single aspect I could focus my hurt on, no individual slight to address. This was systemic, an entire family united in their decision that I was too much trouble to include. I looked around the room at the faces of people I had loved my entire life, people whose approval and affection I had desperately sought. Some looked guilty, some defiant, some merely uncomfortable, but not one of them looked sorry enough to have stood up for me when this decision was made. "I understand now," I said quietly, surprising myself with my composed tone. "For years I've felt like I was imagining things, like I was overreacting when I felt excluded or overlooked. I've made excuses for all of you, blamed myself, tried harder to fit in. But this isn't about me being too sensitive. This is about all of you deciding I'm not worth the effort of basic honesty or inclusion." I placed the soup container on the entry table. I made this from Grandma's recipe. Dad always said it made him feel better when he was sick. But he's not sick, is he? None of this is what it seems. My mother's expression hardened. If you're going to be dramatic, perhaps it's better if you leave. You're proving our point exactly. That was the final blow. With tears threatening but not yet falling, I turned toward the door. Enjoy your peaceful celebration. Don't worry about inviting me to the next one. I won't be waiting for the call. I walked out, closing the door quietly behind me. As I reached my car, I heard the front door open again. Hoping against hope that it was my father coming to apologize, I turned. Instead, I saw my mother retrieving the soup container I had left behind. She glanced at me once, her expression unreadable, then went back inside, closing the door firmly. I got into my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely insert the key. As I backed out of the driveway, the soup container appeared again, this time sailing through the air, to land with a splat on the front step, its contents spilling across the concrete. Whether thrown in anger or simply dropped in carelessness, the message was clear. My peace offering, like me, was unwanted. The drive away from my parents' house passed in a blur. I made it about 3 blocks before I had to pull over, my vision too blurred with tears to continue safely. Parking beside a neighborhood park, I finally allowed the emotions I had been controlling to break free. Deep, wrenching sobs tore through me as the full weight of what had just happened settled onto my shoulders. My family, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, had unanimously decided I wasn't worth including. They had conspired, planned, and lied, all to avoid having me at a celebration I had helped organize. The systematic nature of their exclusion was what hurt the most. This wasn't a thoughtless oversight or a single person's decision, but a collective agreement that family events were better without me. My phone began buzzing with texts and calls. I ignored them all, not ready to hear whatever justifications or half-hearted apologies they might offer. Instead, I sat watching children play on the swings, their carefree laughter a stark contrast to the heaviness in my chest. A physical ache had settled there, making each breath feel like an effort. After nearly an hour, I felt composed enough to drive again. Instead of heading home to my empty apartment, I called my best friend Stephanie. Unlike my family members, Stephanie had always seen me clearly, valuing my sensitivity as empathy rather than dismissing it as drama. "I need to see you," I said when she answered, my voice still thick with tears. "Something happened with my family." "I'll meet you at Ruby's in 20, she replied without hesitation, naming our favorite diner. The familiar booth at Ruby's Diner had witnessed many conversations between Stephanie and me over the years, from college breakups to job celebrations. The vinyl seats were worn and comfortable, the coffee strong and plentiful. By the time Stephanie arrived, I had ordered a pot for us both, though the thought of eating anything made my stomach turn. Stephanie slid into the booth across from me, her expression shifting from concern to protective anger as I recounted what had happened. Unlike my family, she didn't minimize my feelings or suggest I was overreacting. "Those absolute jerks," she said when I finished, her normally gentle voice hard with indignation. "Who does that to their own daughter, their own sister?" Her validation loosened something in my chest, allowing me to take my first full breath since discovering the party. When she reached across the table to squeeze my hand, I managed a small smile through my tears. "The worst part," I said, "is realizing this probably isn't the first time. They've gotten so comfortable with excluding me that they have actual protocols for it. Family meetings, Steph, about how to handle me." Stephanie's eyes narrowed. "You know what, I bet you're right. Remember last summer when your mom said that family reunion was canceled because of the heat wave? I saw pictures on your cousin Julia's Instagram. It definitely happened." A cold realization washed over me. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and opened social media. Sure enough, scrolling back through my cousin's feed revealed multiple family gatherings I had known nothing about. A Christmas Eve dinner last year when I had been told everyone was doing their own thing. A summer barbecue at my brother's new house that I had never been invited to. A baby shower for a cousin where everyone else in the family had been tagged. "I can't believe I never saw this before," I whispered, staring at the photographic evidence of my systematic exclusion. "You trusted them," Stephanie said simply. "That's not your fault." As I continued scrolling, another bitter truth emerged. These events hadn't just happened without me, they had been beautiful, elaborate affairs that someone had put significant effort into organizing. The same mother who claimed to be too busy to help with my father's birthday last year had somehow found time to create personalized party favors for my cousin's baby shower. The same sister who never returned my calls had made a custom photo collage for my brother's housewarming. I had invested so much in this family financially and emotionally. I had stayed local for college to remain close to them. I had spent countless hours planning gatherings, remembering birthdays, and creating special moments. I had listened to their problems, celebrated their successes, and forgiven their slights. And all the while they had been actively excluding me from their lives. "What are you going to do about it?" Stephanie asked, after I had been quiet for several minutes. The question startled me. Until that moment, I hadn't considered that there was anything to do beyond feeling hurt. But Stephanie was right. This wasn't a singular event to recover from, but a pattern that would continue unless something changed. "I don't know," I admitted. "What can I do? I can't force them to want me around." "No," Stephanie agreed, "but you can stop being a doormat. You can show them there are consequences for treating you this way." Something shifted inside me at her words. The hurt began to transform into something sharper, more focused. Righteous anger replaced some of the aching sadness, bringing with it a clarity I hadn't felt before. "You're right," I said, straightening my posture. "No more doormat." Over the next 2 hours, fueled by caffeine and newfound determination, Stephanie and I began formulating a plan. It started as vague ideas about standing up for myself, but gradually evolved into something more strategic. First, I created a comprehensive list of the family's worst behaviors toward me, documenting each instance of exclusion, dismissal, or favoritism I could recall. The list was painfully long, dating back to childhood slights I had never fully processed. Next, we gathered evidence. Screenshots of social media posts showing family events I hadn't been invited to, text messages where my concerns had been dismissed or my achievements minimized. Emails where plans had mysteriously changed without my input. One particularly damning thread showed my mother coordinating a family vacation while deliberately keeping me off the recipient list. Stephanie suggested reaching out to other family members who might have felt similarly marginalized. My cousin Patricia, Uncle Harold's daughter from his first marriage, had often seemed as peripheral to family gatherings as I was. My father's brother Thomas, who had fallen out with my mother years ago, might also provide perspective on the family dynamics. As our planning progressed, we identified the perfect venue for confrontation. My apartment, a space my mother had criticized, but that represented my independence, would serve as the stage. I would invite them under the pretense of having important news to share, ensuring their attendance through individual calls rather than a group message they could ignore. The timing was crucial. My mother's birthday was approaching in 3 weeks, close enough to be convenient but allowing sufficient time to prepare. Selecting a date just before her birthday would ensure she couldn't use her celebration as an excuse to avoid me. The psychological preparation was perhaps the most important aspect. I knew my family's tactics well, their ability to twist situations until I doubted my own perceptions. This time I would be ready. Stephanie helped me anticipate their likely responses and rehearse clear, firm counters to each. "Your mother will try to make you doubt yourself," she warned. "She'll say you're being dramatic or overreacting. You need to stay calm and keep bringing the conversation back to their actions, not your reactions." We practiced repeatedly with Stephanie playing various family members while I maintained my composure in the face of hypothetical gaslighting and dismissal. Each time I faltered, we started again, strengthening my resolve. By the time we left the diner, darkness had fallen, but I felt lighter than I had in years. The pain was still there, a dull ache beneath my breastbone, but it was now accompanied by something else, something that felt remarkably like hope. "They won't know what hit them," Stephanie said as we hugged goodbye in the parking lot. "It's not about hurting them back," I clarified. "It's about finally being seen." She nodded, understanding as always. Sometimes those are the same thing. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into preparations. I created a detailed presentation of my family history, complete with timelines and photographic evidence. I contacted Patricia and Uncle Thomas, both of whom provided additional insights and instances of similar treatment they had experienced. I even reached out to mutual friends who had witnessed my family's behavior toward me, collecting video testimonials that confirmed I wasn't imagining their dismissive attitudes. The most painful part was compiling financial records showing my contributions to family events over the years. Contributions that far exceeded what would be expected given my teacher's salary compared to my siblings' more lucrative careers. Seeing the numbers in black and white made me realize how much I had been trying to buy the approval that should have been freely given. Throughout this process, I maintained radio silence with my immediate family. My father left a single voicemail the day after the birthday incident, his voice hesitant as he said, "Maddie, we should talk about what happened. Call me when you can." My mother sent a text that read simply, "You're overreacting as usual. Call when you're ready to be reasonable." My siblings oscillated between guilty texts and defensive ones. I saved them all as evidence but responded to none. The night before my planned confrontation, I transformed my apartment into what Stephanie jokingly called the Museum of Madeline's Mistreatment. Along one wall, I created a timeline of photos showing family events marking my presence or absence and highlighting patterns. On another, I displayed screenshots of hurtful messages enlarged for easy reading. My dining table held neatly organized folders containing additional evidence, each labeled with the name of the family member whose behavior it documented. As I surveyed my work, a strange calm settled over me. For perhaps the first time in my life, I wasn't questioning my perceptions or doubting my right to be upset. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable, and seeing it all laid out validated what I had felt for years but could never quite articulate. I set up a small recording device not to use against them but to protect myself from later gaslighting about what was said. I arranged seating strategically, positioning my own chair slightly higher than the others to maintain a psychological advantage. I prepared refreshments because even in confrontation, I couldn't quite abandon the hospitality I had been raised to provide. Finally, I called Stephanie, who would be arriving early to provide moral support. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" she asked. "No," I admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." The morning of the confrontation dawned clear and bright, a beautiful spring day that contrasted sharply with my nervous energy. I had barely slept rehearsing my talking points until they were embedded in my memory. By the time Stephanie arrived at 10, I had already rearranged the living room furniture 3 times, seeking the perfect configuration for what was to come. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad," Stephanie observed as she helped me set out coffee and the pastries I had stress-baked at 5 that morning. "That's exactly how it feels," I admitted, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from my carefully chosen outfit, a professional-looking navy dress that made me feel armored. "What if they don't come? Or worse, what if they all come and I fall apart?" "Then I'll pick up where you leave off," she promised, squeezing my shoulder. "But you won't fall apart. I've never seen you more prepared for anything." The invitations I had sent were deliberately vague, mentioning only important family news I needed to share in person. I had called each family member individually, using a tone that suggested excitement rather than confrontation. To discourage speculation, I had hinted at different possibilities to different people: a job opportunity to my father, a health update to my mother, relationship news to my siblings. The timing, a Saturday morning, when none had standing commitments, had been carefully chosen to maximize attendance. My brother Kevin arrived first 15 minutes early, as was his habit. He looked surprised to see Stephanie there but greeted her warmly before turning to me with concerned eyes. "Are you okay, Maddie? We've been worried. You haven't answered any of our calls or texts." Before I could respond, my sister Rebecca arrived, followed closely by my parents. My mother entered with the air of someone doing me a favor by attending, while my father looked genuinely relieved to see me attempting a smile that I did not return. "What's all this about Madeline?" my mother asked, looking around suspiciously at the transformed apartment. Her eyes lingered on the covered displays, clearly wondering what lay beneath the sheets I had draped over them. "Your message was very mysterious. I hope this isn't some elaborate apology for the scene you caused at your father's birthday." I noticed Stephanie stiffen beside me, but I remained calm, gesturing toward the seating area. Please, everyone have a seat. We'll get started once everyone's settled. To my surprise, Aunt Pauline and Uncle Harold arrived next, followed by my cousins Julia and Nathan. I had invited them knowing they had been part of the decision to exclude me, but I hadn't been certain they would come. Their presence completed the circle of those most involved in the systematic exclusion I had experienced. As everyone found seats, an awkward silence fell. They were expecting an announcement, perhaps even good news, based on my carefully crafted invitations. What they were about to receive was something entirely different. I moved to the center of the room, adopting the calm, authoritative presence I used in my classroom. Years of managing fourth graders had taught me how to command attention without raising my voice. Thank you all for coming, I began. I know you're expecting some kind of announcement, and in a way that's accurate. I do have something important to share with all of you. I paused, making eye contact with each person before continuing. 2 weeks ago, I discovered that my family had deliberately excluded me from my father's birthday celebration, going so far as to lie about the event being canceled. That discovery was painful, but it also served as a catalyst for some important realizations. My mother immediately shifted forward in her seat. Madeline, if this is going to be another dramatic episode about the birthday, I think we should. Please don't interrupt, Mom, I said firmly. You'll have an opportunity to respond when I'm finished. The assertiveness in my tone seemed to surprise her into silence. I continued, removing the sheet from the first display to reveal the timeline of family events. This is a visual representation of family gatherings over the past 5 years, I explained, pointing to the meticulously organized photographs. The ones in blue frames are events I was invited to and attended. The ones in red frames are events I was never told about. The ones in yellow frames are events I was told were canceled but actually took place without me. There were far more red and yellow frames than blue, creating a stark visual impact. My father's face paled as he took in the evidence. My siblings exchanged uncomfortable glances. I always felt there were times when I seemed to miss family news or inside jokes. Now I understand why. It wasn't my imagination or oversensitivity, as I've been repeatedly told. It was deliberate exclusion. I moved to the next display, uncovering enlarged screenshots of text messages and emails. These are communications between various family members discussing how to handle me planning events without my knowledge or dismissing my concerns. One particularly damning email from my mother to my siblings read, "Remember not to mention the lake house weekend to Madeline. She'll just want to come and then spend the whole time making everyone feel guilty about something or other." I continued methodically through each display, presenting the evidence without accusation or emotional language, simply stating facts. I showed the financial records of my contributions to family events, significantly higher proportionally than any other family members, unquote. I played brief video testimonials from friends who had witnessed my family's dismissive behavior toward me. Throughout my presentation, I maintained the calm, professional demeanor I had practiced with Stephanie. When my voice threatened to waver, I paused, took a breath, and continued. This wasn't about creating drama or seeking sympathy. It was about finally being heard. After nearly 40 minutes of methodical evidence presentation, I reached the final portion of my planned confrontation. Now came the difficult part, the individual accountability I had steeled myself to address. "Mom," I said, turning to face her directly, "for as long as I can remember, you've treated me differently from Kevin and Rebecca. You've dismissed my achievements, criticized my choices, and repeatedly implied that my emotional responses are excessive or invalid. When others in the family followed your lead in excluding me, you not only allowed it but encouraged it." My mother's face had grown increasingly rigid throughout my presentation. "This is absurd," she began, but I held up a hand. "I'm not finished. Dad," I continued, turning to my father. "You've witnessed this treatment for years and remained silent. Your passivity enabled Mom's behavior and signaled to others that it was acceptable to treat me as less than. You've expressed private appreciation for my efforts while publicly allowing me to be diminished." My father couldn't meet my eyes, his gaze fixed on his hands. I addressed each family member in turn, calmly outlining specific instances of their participation in my exclusion. My sister Rebecca's two-faced behavior praising me to my face while mocking me to others. My brother Kevin's performative inclusion at public events while privately participating in plans to exclude me. My extended family's willing acceptance of the narrative that I was too difficult to include. When I had addressed everyone individually, I moved to the center of the room again. I've spent my life trying to earn a place in this family, believing that if I was helpful enough, accommodating enough, or successful enough, I would finally be fully included. Today, I'm done trying to earn what should have been freely given. From now on, our relationship will be on new terms. I outlined my boundaries clearly, the conditions under which I would continue to engage with them. No more accepting last-minute invitations that were clearly afterthoughts. No more contributing disproportionately to family events. No more allowing my feelings to be dismissed as oversensitivity. I require basic respect and honesty, I concluded. Not special treatment, just the same consideration given to every other member of this family. If you can't provide that, I will limit my interaction with you accordingly. I'm not issuing an ultimatum. I'm establishing boundaries. The choice of how to respond is yours. I set a clear time frame explaining that I would not be attending any family gatherings for the next month while they considered what I had shared. After that, I would be open to individual conversations with anyone who wished to rebuild our relationship on healthier terms. This isn't about punishment, I said softly. It's about finally valuing myself enough to demand the respect I deserve. I love all of you, but I can no longer accept being treated as less than. With that, I stepped back, signaling that the formal part of my presentation was complete. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy with the weight of truths long unspoken. The silence lasted only moments before my mother rose to her feet, her face flushed with anger. "This is exactly what we were talking about," she said, gesturing around the room at the displays. "This elaborate production, this performance. This is why we sometimes need a break from you, Madeline. Everything becomes such a dramatic ordeal." I had anticipated this reaction, had prepared for it with Stephanie's help, but it still stung. Before I could respond, however, something unexpected happened. "Sit down, Amanda," Aunt Pauline said sharply. "For once in your life, just listen." My mother turned to her sister-in-law with surprise. "You can't possibly be taking her side in this." "I'm not taking sides," Aunt Pauline replied. "But I am acknowledging that what Madeline has shown us today deserves more than immediate dismissal. She's put together a compelling case." My mother looked around the room for support but found only uncomfortable expressions. Even Uncle Harold, who typically followed her lead in family disputes, seemed unwilling to back her this time. With a huff of frustration, she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "This is ridiculous. Call me when you're ready to behave like an adult, Madeline." The door slammed behind her, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. I had expected her departure but had hoped it might come after some acknowledgement, however small. The complete rejection hurt, but I remained standing, determined not to crumble. To my surprise, no one else moved to follow her. My father sat with his head bowed, looking older than I had ever seen him. After several long moments, he looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "I'm sorry, Maddie," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I knew things weren't right, but I told myself it wasn't as bad as it seemed, that you were strong enough to handle it. That keeping the peace was more important than speaking up." His admission broke something open in the room. My sister Rebecca began to cry quietly, mascara tracking down her cheeks. "I didn't realize how much it all added up," she said between sniffles. "Each thing seemed small on its own, but seeing it all together like this." She gestured to the timeline of exclusion. "I'm so sorry." My brother Kevin, always more reserved with his emotions, cleared his throat. "I went along with things I shouldn't have," he admitted. "It was easier to follow Mom's lead than to question why we were treating you differently. That's not an excuse, it's just, I failed you as a brother and I'm sorry." One by one, family members began to speak, some offering genuine remorse, others still struggling to fully accept their role in what had happened. Uncle Harold admitted to following my mother's lead without question. Cousin Julia revealed her own insecurities had made her receptive to excluding someone who seemed more accomplished. Cousin Nathan confessed he had simply never thought about how the family's behavior might be affecting me. Aunt Pauline, ever the straight talker, addressed me directly. You've given us a lot to think about, Madeline. What you've shown us today can't be brushed aside or explained away. I can't speak for everyone, but I'm ashamed of my part in it. The room fell silent again, this time a thoughtful silence, rather than a shocked one. I looked around at their faces, seeing genuine contemplation, where I had expected only defensiveness. It wasn't universal. Some expressions still held reservation or confusion, but it was more acknowledgement than I had dared to hope for. After most family members had left, my father lingered, looking lost without my mother beside him. "Can we talk privately?" he asked. In my small kitchen away from the evidence displays and Stephanie's protective presence, my father seemed to shrink into himself. "I failed you," he said simply. "I've been failing you for years and I didn't want to see it." "Why, Dad?" I asked, the question I had wanted to ask for so long. Why was it always different for me? He sighed heavily. "Your mother and I. We have different ways of showing love. She's always been harder on the ones she thinks are strongest. She saw how sensitive you were, how deeply you felt things, and she thought she was preparing you for a world that wouldn't be gentle with that sensitivity." "That doesn't explain excluding me from family events," I pointed out. "No," he agreed sadly. "That part was wrong, all wrong. It started small, leaving you out of things we thought might upset you, and somehow it grew into this pattern none of us questioned anymore." He reached for my hand across the table. "I know I have a lot to make up for, Maddie. I don't know if I can, but I'd like to try." The next few weeks brought a series of difficult but necessary conversations. My sister Rebecca reached out first, asking to meet for coffee. Her initial remorse gave way to revelations about her own insecurities. "You always seemed so put together, so sure of yourself," she admitted. Mom would compare us, saying things like, "Why can't you be more organized like Madeline?" Or, "Madeline would have thought this through better." I started resenting you for it, even though it wasn't your fault. My brother Kevin's approach was more practical. He created a new family text group that deliberately included me and used it to share updates and plans openly. "No more secret arrangements," he wrote in the first message. My mother remained distant for nearly 2 weeks. When she finally reached out, her text was stiff but present. "I've been thinking about what you said. I don't agree with how you presented it, but I'm willing to discuss your concerns further." It wasn't an apology, but it was an opening. Our first meeting was tense, my mother's pride warring with her desire to maintain family connections. "I never meant to hurt you," she said, the closest she could come to acknowledging wrongdoing. "I thought I was doing what was best for everyone." "Including me?" I asked pointedly. She hesitated. "I thought I was doing what was best for you too, in my way. I see now that I was wrong about that." Small changes began to appear. Invitations came directly to me rather than through third parties. Family members made efforts to acknowledge my contributions and include me in planning discussions. My father called regularly, sometimes just to chat about my day in a way he had rarely done before. The first post-confrontation family dinner was a test of these new dynamics. Held at a neutral restaurant rather than anyone's home, it was smaller than usual, just my immediate family. When my mother made a passive-aggressive comment about my new haircut, my father surprised us all by saying quietly but firmly, "That's not kind or necessary, Amanda." The table fell silent, all of us stunned by this departure from his usual conflict avoidance. My mother appeared equally shocked, her mouth opening and closing before she finally murmured, "You're right. I apologize, Madeline. Your hair looks lovely." The apology was clearly difficult for her, the words coming out stiffly, but the effort itself represented a seismic shift in our family's tectonic plates. My brother caught my eye across the table, raising his eyebrows slightly in shared amazement. As the weeks passed, I maintained my boundaries firmly but fairly. When Aunt Pauline made a thoughtless remark about my apartment during a visit, I calmly pointed out the criticism and asked her to rephrase more respectfully. To her credit, she apologized immediately and made an effort to comment positively on the aspects of my home she did appreciate. Not every relationship improved equally. My mother's changes were surface level at best, her fundamental belief in her own rightness too deeply ingrained for dramatic transformation. My sister oscillated between genuine connection and old patterns of comparison and competition. But my father bloomed in surprising ways, revealing a warmth and attentiveness I had always craved from him. Most surprisingly, certain extended family members I had rarely felt close to began reaching out independently. Cousin Patricia, who had provided insights during my preparation, became a regular texting buddy. Uncle Thomas, long estranged from family gatherings, invited me to lunch and shared his own experiences with family dynamics, offering perspective I found valuable. 3 months after my confrontation, I received an invitation to a family picnic at the lake house. Unlike previous invitations, this one came well in advance, included specific details, and was sent to me directly rather than through my siblings. A personal note from my father was attached. "We really hope you can join us, Maddie. It wouldn't be the same without you." Reading those words, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, hope tempered by caution, appreciation laced with lingering hurt. The family I had now wasn't perfect, wasn't fully healed, but it was more honest than the one I had before. And in that honesty, painful as it sometimes was, lay the possibility of something I had almost given up on, a chance to be fully seen and genuinely included. The journey toward healing began with me, not my family. In the wake of the confrontation, I started therapy, something I had considered for years, but had avoided out of fear my family would see it as further evidence of my oversensitivity. My therapist, Dr. Marlowe, helped me process the layers of family trauma without becoming mired in bitterness. "Your family's behavior was wrong," she told me during an early session, "but holding on to that anger will only hurt you in the long run. The goal isn't to punish them forever, but to create healthier relationships going forward, whether with them or with the family you choose for yourself." Those words became my guide as I navigated the complex aftermath of speaking my truth. I learned to set boundaries without apology, to recognize when I was falling into old patterns of seeking validation, and to build confidence in my own perceptions rather than doubting them when challenged. Perhaps the most significant growth came in developing my chosen family. Stephanie had always been a steadfast presence, but I began to nurture other friendships as well, investing the energy I had previously reserved for trying to win my family's approval. My colleague Veronica became a hiking buddy, our weekend treks through Pennsylvania's state parks, offering physical exertion and emotional release. My neighbor Marcus, a retired literature professor, introduced me to a book club where intellectual discussion flourished without judgment. These relationships, built on mutual respect and genuine interest, showed me what healthy connection felt like. There were no eggshells to walk on, no fear that one misstep would result in exclusion. Disagreements were handled with directness rather than passive aggression, and my opinions were valued even when they differed from others. Within my biological family, the changes varied widely in depth and permanence. My father underwent the most profound transformation. Free from the constraint of always siding with my mother, he began expressing his own views more openly and making independent efforts to connect with me. He started a tradition of monthly lunch dates where we explored new restaurants together, conversations flowing more easily with each meeting. "I always worried about saying the wrong thing to you," he confessed during one such lunch. "You felt things so deeply and I was afraid of hurting you. So I said nothing instead, which hurt you more in the end." My brother Kevin approached reconciliation methodically, as befitted his analytical nature. He made concrete changes to include me in family communications and events, setting reminders to check in regularly and openly acknowledging when old patterns threatened to reemerge. His efforts lacked the emotional depth of my father's, but had a consistent reliability I came to appreciate. My sister Rebecca's path was more erratic. Some days she seemed genuinely interested in building a healthier relationship, asking thoughtful questions about my life, and acknowledging past hurtful behaviors. Other times, she would slip into competitive comparisons or subtle digs, usually when our mother was present. After one particularly difficult interaction, I invited her for coffee and addressed it directly. "I notice you're different when Mom's around," I said gently. "More critical of me, less authentic." Her initial defensiveness gave way to a surprising vulnerability. "I still want her approval so badly," she admitted. "When she starts criticizing you, it's easier to join in than to challenge her." I know it's wrong, but I'm afraid of becoming the target instead. That conversation didn't magically fix our relationship, but it added a layer of understanding that helped me respond to her behavior with more compassion and less hurt. I could now see her actions as reflections of her own insecurities, rather than genuine assessments of my worth. My mother remained the most resistant to change. Our interactions improved on the surface with fewer overtly critical comments and more consistent inclusion in family events. But the underlying dynamic of conditional approval remained largely intact. I learned to accept this limitation, to appreciate the small improvements without expecting complete transformation. Dr. Marlowe helped me understand that my mother's behavior was rooted in her own unresolved issues, not in any deficiency on my part. You can love someone while recognizing they're not capable of giving you everything you need, she told me. That's not settling, it's being realistic about human limitations. Extended family relationships shifted along similar lines. Some relatives, like Aunt Pauline, made genuine efforts to understand and change their behavior. Others, like certain cousins, maintained a polite distance, uncomfortable with the new expectation of authentic interaction rather than surface pleasantries. The ripple effects of my confrontation extended beyond my immediate situation. My cousin Patricia, inspired by my boundary setting, began addressing her own marginalization within the family. Uncle Thomas, long considered the black sheep, was cautiously welcomed back into some family gatherings after years of exclusion. The most surprising development came 6 months after the confrontation, when my mother called to ask for my help planning my father's next birthday. "You've always been good at organizing these things," she said, the closest thing to a compliment she had offered in years. The celebration was smaller than previous years, but more genuine. Everyone present had actively chosen to be there, and the interactions, while sometimes awkward, had an authenticity that previous gatherings had lacked. When my father thanked me for the cake I had baked, the traditional chocolate hazelnut he loved, there was no undercurrent of compensation for exclusion, just simple appreciation between father and daughter. Today, 2 years after that pivotal discovery and confrontation, my relationship with my family exists in a new form. I engage selectively, maintaining strong boundaries while remaining open to genuine connection. I've forgiven much without forgetting the lessons learned, understanding that true forgiveness doesn't require pretending the hurt never happened. Distance remains with those still entrenched in toxic patterns, particularly my mother and certain extended family members. But even these relationships have evolved into something more honest, the pretense of perfect family harmony replaced by a more authentic acknowledgement of our limitations and differences. The wisdom I've gained through this journey runs deeper than I could have imagined. I've learned that self-worth cannot be sourced from external validation, that it must come from within to be sustainable. I've discovered that true courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to act, despite it, to speak truth, even when your voice shakes. Perhaps most importantly, I've come to understand that setting boundaries isn't selfish or divisive, but rather creates the possibility for more authentic connection. By clearly defining what was acceptable and what wasn't, I gave my relationships the chance to evolve beyond the shallow, performative connections they had been. I've broken generational patterns of silence and accommodation that would likely have continued into the next generation had they gone unchallenged. That knowledge brings a profound sense of peace, a feeling that my pain served a greater purpose than mere personal healing. The family I have now isn't perfect. We still struggle, still hurt each other, sometimes still fall into old patterns when stressed or tired. But there's an honesty to our imperfection that wasn't there before, an acknowledgement of our flaws, and a willingness, at least among some, to work on them. I've come to believe that true family, whether biological or chosen, is built on a foundation of respect and honesty. Without these elements, the structure may look intact from the outside, but will inevitably collapse under pressure. By insisting on respect, even when it meant risking relationships, I ultimately saved those worth saving, and freed myself from the burden of maintaining those that weren't. If you're facing similar family dynamics, know that you deserve to be treated with basic respect and inclusion. Setting boundaries isn't about punishing others, it's about protecting yourself and creating the possibility for healthier relationships. The path isn't easy and not everyone will be capable of meeting you on new terms, but the peace that comes from living authentically is worth the difficult journey. Have you ever had to confront family members about how they treat you? What boundaries have you set in your relationships? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming family challenges. Remember, sometimes the family we choose is as important as the one we're born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage on your own journey toward authentic relationships.